Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. The first blow came quick. A boot to the gut while Silas Crane was tying his saddlebag to a post outside the Dagger Gulch saloon. He collapsed like a rag doll in the dirt, his lean frame crumpling under the weight of the kick. The dust rose around him as his worn hat tumbled off, revealing a crown of unkempt white hair and a lined face scorched by sun and time. Laughter erupted from the porch above. "Look at him! O.L.'s scarecrow wandered into town," sneered Hoyt Murdock, the larger of the two brothers. Hoyt always led the cruelty, and Jed followed. Silas coughed as he propped himself on one elbow, eyes squinting in the harsh sun. "Didn't mean no harm," he muttered, his voice dry as tumbleweed. But Hoyt wasn't looking for apologies. "A man who don't speak when spoken to must want his teeth scattered," he said, grabbing Silas by the collar. The saloon doors creaked behind them, and the townsfolk peered through grimy windows. They didn't move. Nobody helped strangers in Dagger Gulch, especially not ones who looked like they were one stiff wind away from the grave. But in Silas's silence, something ancient stirred, something dangerous. Jed snatched the old man's pistol from his belt and turned it over like a toy. "What the hell is this relic? Looks like it's been buried in a grave." The peacemaker had a cracked ivory handle, and the barrel was scratched and dull. "You know how to use this old-timer?" Jed mocked, aiming it toward the street and dry firing. Silas didn't flinch. He sat there in the dirt, quiet, brushing off his shirt with shaking fingers. But behind those spectacles, his eyes tracked the pendant Jed had ripped from his neck. A small silver bull skull wrapped in leather. The moment it hit the dirt, a strange hush settled across the street. One of the elders at the well, Blind Tommy, spat out his chewing tobacco and backed into the shadows, mumbling under his breath. "I seen that pendant before. That ain't no trinket. That belonged to—" He didn't finish. He couldn't, because the man it belonged to was supposed to be dead, killed 15 years ago in a canyon ambush. But Tommy's knees were shaking, because the ghost standing in the dirt wasn't a ghost at all. Back in the street, Hoyt pressed a heavy boot into Silas's chest, forcing him flat again. "You deaf, old man?" he hissed. "You think you're too good to beg?" Silas didn't respond. He stared at the sky, the edge of a smile curling at his lips. The sheriff's window curtain shifted, but the door didn't open. Nobody wanted to get between the Murdock boys and their brand of fun. "Maybe he's dumb too," Jed said, stepping closer, twirling the pistol. "Let's see what happens when we make him squeal." Just then, a coyote howled. Not from the outskirts, but from within the town, close. Too close. The air shifted. It got colder, as if a storm were brewing under the earth itself. Silas sat up slowly, ignoring the pressure on his ribs, and said low and soft, "3 seconds, boys. That's all you got." Hoyt blinked. "What? 3?" Silas repeated. Jed laughed. "He's counting now." "2," Silas whispered. "You want a count?" Hoyt growled, lifting his boot. "Here's your damn count." Then the sound cracked through the square like thunder. Jed staggered backward, blood blooming on his hand. The peacemaker had fired, but not from his grip. Silas stood now, eyes clear, body no longer frail but rigid with precision. Smoke rose from the second revolver he had drawn from under his duster coat. One nobody noticed. It was polished, pearl-handled, and silent as death itself. "You boys talk too much," he muttered. Jed dropped the gun and crumpled to the ground, groaning. Hoyt froze, eyes wide. "You tricked us," he hissed. You faked it." Silas looked down at his dusty coat, the hat now perched firmly back on his head. "Didn't fake a thing. I really am old. I just ain't dead yet." And with that, he holstered the weapon in one fluid motion that spoke of years, no, decades, of killing. From the shadows, blind Tommy gasped. It is him. Sweet mercy, it's Silas Redwind Crane. And for the first time in 20 years, the name danced down Dagger Gulch's spine like a cold knife. Hoyt backed away, hand trembling, trying to lift Jed. "We didn't know," he whispered. You're just a ghost story." "No, boy," Silas said, stepping forward with the heavy weight of judgment in his boots. "I'm the consequence." His voice cut sharper than his bullets. The old pendant still lay in the dust. Jed had dropped it when the gun fired. Silas stooped, retrieved it, and brushed it gently with his thumb. "You think legends die in stories, but legends die when you forget why they mattered." He stepped over Jed and moved toward Hoyt. "And sometimes, when you spit on them, they come back to remind you." Hoyt dropped to his knees. "Please, I didn't mean to." But Silas raised a finger. "Save it. I don't kill men for being stupid. I kill them when they don't learn." The saloon was dead silent. Even the wind held its breath. Then Silas said something that would rattle Dagger Gulch forever. "Tell your daddy I'm back. And I ain't finished." From the edge of the crowd, a young deputy stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Sheriff Cobb hadn't moved. Too old, too scared, too smart. Silas turned to the deputy. "Your town's got rot in its bones, son," he said calmly. "You better choose if you're part of it or part of fixing it." The deputy swallowed hard. "Why, you really him? You really Redwind?" Silas didn't answer. He just walked. Past the church, past the shuttered post office, past the brothel windows where painted ladies watched with wide eyes. Every bootstep echoed like a warning bell. Behind him, Jed moaned in the dirt. Hoyt wept softly, and the people of Dagger Gulch didn't move. They'd seen something today, something impossible. The frail old man who wandered into town with a bent back and a stutter wasn't a relic. He was a legend, and now he was walking into their lives again like judgment in flesh. The wind picked up, sweeping dust into the air. In its swirl, a whisper rode. "Redwind rides again." They called him Redwind, not for the color of his coat or the blood he spilled, but for the speed with which he disappeared, like wind off a canyon cliff. Back in 1867, Silas Crane rode with no gang, no badge, and no name. Just a black horse named Luna, and a grudge he never spoke about. He was tall then, broad-shouldered, with eyes that looked like they'd already seen the end of the world. In those years, Dagger Gulch wasn't yet the Dust Bowl it would become. It was a mining haven crawling with gamblers, mercenaries, and men who thought killing made them powerful. Silas arrived the same night 3 miners were strung from a tree for cheating at cards. No one asked why he was there, but 3 days later, the men who'd done the hanging were found dead in the canyon, each with a bull's skull carved into their boots. That was the first time anyone said his name in fear. "Redwind's in town," they whispered. "Don't blink, don't breathe, don't cross him." And just like that, a myth was born from a man who never wanted one. But legends burn hotter when they're built on silence. Silas didn't drink. He didn't boast. He didn't chase women or seek coin. He lived on black coffee, desert jerky, and an old code that only he understood. He took jobs no one else would, like escorting a wagon full of cholera orphans through Comanche territory or hunting down a marshal who'd turned butcher. He never killed for money, only justice, real justice, not the kind scratched onto wanted posters by greedy politicians, but the kind carved into the hearts of the wronged. One day, a boy's mother was found dead outside White Elk Ridge. Sheriff claimed it was suicide. The boy knew better. Silas listened, said nothing, rode out. 3 days later, the sheriff's house burned to ash, and his boots were left at the town square, with bull skulls cut into the soles. That boy, He grew up to be the deputy who froze outside the saloon years later. The one who watched Red Wind rise again. He knew what justice looked like. He'd seen it, but even legends break. In the winter of '72, Silas disappeared after a canyon ambush left his horse dead and half his ribs shattered. They said the Murdocks had finally caught him, led by Elias Murdock, patriarch and brute. But no body was ever found. Only blood. Lots of it. And a torn piece of Silas's coat pinned to a tree with a Bowie knife. After that, the name Red Wind faded into campfire stories and outlaw ballads. The Murdocks grew bolder, hungrier. Elias bought up half the county, built his sons, Hoyt and Jed, into wolves with gold teeth. Dagger Gulch fell under their shadow like the rest of the valley. People forgot, or pretended to. The memory of Red Wind was too painful, too dangerous. Some said he became a ghost. Others claimed he was hiding in Mexico, scarred and broken. But blind Tommy swore he'd seen Silas in a graveyard once, whispering to a stone with no name. "He don't haunt the dead," Tommy said. "He just don't trust the living anymore." That's why when Silas stepped into Dagger Gulch again, hair gone white, hands trembling, ribs still crooked from old wounds, no one recognized him. And that was exactly what he wanted. For years, he'd wandered from ghost towns to border towns, looking for something he never found. Peace. He'd almost settled in Sand Creek, built a tiny shack beside a dried-up river, and lived on wild onion and regret. But then word came through a half-dead drifter. The Murdocks were killing again, stringing up farmers, buying off sheriffs, laughing in saloons. That's when Silas packed his guns. He didn't do it out of rage. Rage burns out. He did it because there was still a boy inside him. The one who saw his mother gunned down in front of a church by Elias Murdock in 1845. Silas had been 5. He remembered the blood on the Bible. And he remembered Elias's grin. "God don't save whores," Elias had said. That day, Silas learned 2 things. God wasn't coming, and justice had to wear boots. Now he was back, and no one knew, except maybe Tommy, except maybe the wind. He timed it all perfectly. He wanted the Murdocks to see him rise from the dirt like a prophecy. He let them beat him, let them steal his pendant, let them think he was nothing, because he knew one thing. Men like Hoyt only understand power when it hits them like a bullet. And Silas had saved his bullets for this very town, for this very bloodline. As he walked through Dagger Gulch that afternoon, the townsfolk watched with open mouths, their silence louder than the wind. "Red Wind," they whispered now. But they didn't cheer, because justice isn't warm. It doesn't smile. It walks slow, heavy, with a shadow longer than memory. That night, the church bell rang again. No one knew who rang it, but they knew why. Judgment had returned to town, and he had silver in his holster and a name that made the devil blink. The night after Red Wind walked through Dagger Gulch like a phantom from a forgotten war, the town didn't sleep. Lamps stayed lit behind shuttered windows. Guns were loaded. Parents held their children tighter, whispering old stories they'd long buried. In the saloon, the Murdock boys sat in stunned silence, bandaging Jed's hand. Hoyt's eyes kept flicking to the door like it might swing open at any second. "It was him," Jed mumbled through gritted teeth. "I seen the pendant. I felt it. Same one Pa warned us about." Hoyt said nothing, but he remembered. The stories their father told were never bedtime tales. They were lessons in fear. "He's dead," their father would say. "But if he ever comes back, don't run. Don't speak. Just kill." The pendant Hoyt had stepped on earlier now lay in a whiskey glass beside his gun. The silver bull's skull glinted under the low light like it was still alive. "We made a mistake," Hoyt said finally, jaw clenched. "We poked a ghost with a stick." Outside, the wind had shifted. It was colder now, like the land itself was bracing for something bloody. Elias Murdock had once been a preacher. That's what made him dangerous. He knew how to sound holy while doing evil. By the time he was 40, he'd traded the cross for a cattle brand and built an empire from dead ranchers and buried rivals. He didn't kill with rage. He killed with scripture, quoting psalms as he fired bullets through skulls. His sons had never known hunger or loss, just power. From the time Hoyt could ride, Elias made him flog debtors in front of crowds. Jed was taught to shoot birds out of the sky blindfolded. Control the fear, Elias told them. That's how you control men. But even Elias had fears, and one of them wore a bull skull pendant and never spoke more than necessary. Silas Crane, Redwind, the last man Elias ever considered a threat. He don't kill fast, Elias once said. He kills like God, slow, quiet, and always watching. When the boys were young, Elias had a bounty set on Silas's head so high even lawmen crossed borders for it. But Silas vanished. Until now, at the Murdock estate, a sprawling mansion 2 hills north of town, Elias was waiting. He'd already heard. Word moved fast in broken places. A stable boy had ridden through the canyon with blood on his shirt and fear in his eyes. He's back, was all he said before collapsing. Elias didn't shout, didn't curse. He just stood from his leather chair, brushed off his vest, and stared out the window into the darkness. Red Wind, he whispered, like tasting the name. Behind him, his wife, Mariana, trembled. She had known Silas once, before she became a Murdock, before the preacher's charm turned into shackles. She still kept a journal with the name SC scratched into the last page. "Do you think he's here for revenge?" she asked. Elias didn't look at her. "He's not here for vengeance," he said. "He's here for balance." That night, Elias Murdock unlocked the cellar where he kept his old guns. Long-oiled, never forgotten. Beside them was a Bible, cracked and splattered with something darker than wine. He put that in his coat pocket too. Dagger Gulch had seen its share of storms. Flash floods, cholera, even a fire that took 3 blocks. But this storm wasn't made of water or flame. It was made of memory, of reckoning. As Silas stood at the edge of the cemetery the next morning, staring at a grave with no name, the wind tugged at his coat like a child trying to pull him away. But he didn't move. The headstone was cracked, half buried in thistle. "She should have had flowers," he said softly. "Should have had justice." Behind him, footsteps. Slow, careful. It was the young deputy from yesterday, Micah Langley, just 25, with clear eyes and a badge too big for his chest. "Mr. Crane?" he asked. Silas didn't answer. I mean Redwind?" Silas turned. "Don't call me that," he said. "That name ain't mine. It's theirs." Micah swallowed. "The whole town's talking. Folks are scared." "Good," Silas said, voice like sandpaper. "Fear keeps the devils in check." Micah shifted his weight. "Why'd you come back now?" Silas looked past him. "Because the devils stopped hiding." Back at the saloon, the Murdock boys were gearing up like war was coming. And it was. Not just with bullets, but with the slow collapse of everything they'd built on fear. People weren't looking at them the same anymore. That quiet old man had reminded everyone what a real outlaw looked like. Not some drunk with a big hat and daddy's name, but a man with quiet wrath and steady hands. Jed grunted as he adjusted his sling. "We can kill him. He's old. He can't be faster than us." Hoyt didn't answer. He was staring at the pendant again, the way it pulsed under the low lantern light. "He ain't come back to die, Jed. He came back to bury something." Jed scoffed. "Then let's bury him first." But Hoyt didn't move, because deep down, behind all his bluster, he'd seen something in Silas's eyes. Not anger, not pride, just finality, like a storm that didn't care what it destroyed. like justice wearing boots. The church had been boarded up for years, but that morning, its doors stood open. The old bell rope dangled like a noose in the wind. Silas stepped inside, his boots echoing on the warped floorboards. Every step a sermon. Dust danced in sunbeams cutting through broken stained glass. He sat on the front pew, not to pray. He hadn't spoken to God in decades, but to remember. This was where his mother died, shot through the heart while clutching a loaf of bread and a child. Silas himself, just 5 years old. He could still feel her blood in his palms, and he could still hear Elias Murdock's voice, mocking, righteous, unpunished. Silas took out the pendant, the silver bull skull. "It ain't about revenge," he muttered to the empty chapel. "It's about ending the silence." He tucked it beneath his shirt and stood. From the door, Deputy Micah watched, hat in hand. "Sheriff Cobb's stepping down," he said. "Says the town needs a new man now that you're here." Silas turned to him slowly. "I'm not here to wear a badge." Micah nodded. "Maybe, but whether you like it or not, people are already following your shadow." Meanwhile, back at the estate, the Murdock house was boiling. Hoyt kicked over a whiskey cabinet. Jed was pale and restless. "He setting up camp in the church," Hoyt spat. "Like he's some damn messiah." Elias Murdock watched them both with the calm of a snake sunning itself on stone. "Let him," he said. "Let him gather his little flock. The more eyes he has on him, the fewer watching us." Mariana stood by the fireplace, silent, clutching her rosary. "He won't stop, Elias," she whispered. "You know he won't." Elias turned slowly, the firelight catching the scar on his neck, the one Silas gave him in their last fight. "I don't need him to stop," Elias said coldly. "I need him to die. And this time, I'll put the bullet in myself." Jed swallowed hard. "But he's not just a man, Pa. He moves like he ain't afraid to die." Elias stepped closer. "That's the trick of it, son. The dead don't fight. The living with nothing left do." Then he handed Jed a black envelope. "Ride east. Bring back the men from Harlow Ridge. We're not fighting a man. We're killing a legend." By nightfall, the church was full. Not with prayers, but people. Dozens of townsfolk sat in silence as Silas stood at the pulpit, hands resting on the edge like he used to grip a saddle. "I didn't come to save you," he said plainly. "I ain't got that kind of mercy left. But I came to show you that fear ain't the only law in this town." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some were crying. Others just nodded slowly. In the back, a little girl whispered to her father, "Is he the one who rides wind?" Her father said nothing, just squeezed her hand tighter. Silas continued, voice like gravel on stone. "The Muddocks ain't kings. They're termites. They eat till nothing's left. But that ends now." A man near the aisle stood up. "You expect us to fight?" Silas shook his head. "No. I expect you to stop pretending. You're already dead." The bell above them groaned in the wind again. "You won't get a hero," he added. "Just a man who won't back down." And that somehow was enough. Outside, the wind shifted. Storm was coming. Real storm. Thunder rolled from the canyon like hooves of the past galloping home. Micah caught up with Silas as he left the church. "They're scared," Micah said. "But they believe you." Silas lit a match against the heel of his boot and brought it to a cigar. "Belief's a fine thing, Deputy, but it won't stop a bullet." "What will?" Micah asked. Silas exhaled smoke, eyes fixed on the horizon, knowing where to shoot first. He handed Micah a folded map. "You know these hills?" Micah nodded. "Then get 10 men, ones who can ride and ain't afraid to dig." "Dig what?" Silas looked at him hard. "A trap. Tomorrow, Jed brings Harlow Ridge with him. Cutthroats, ex-Confederates. If we let them walk in, we die. But if we break the path under 'em, we break their backs," Micah finished. Silas nodded. Start before sunrise. Micah opened his mouth to ask more, but Silas was already walking into the dark, his silhouette swallowed by the wind. In that moment, Micah knew. Dagger Gulch was about to be baptized in fire. And Silas wasn't just back. He was building a war. The first shovel hit dry earth before sunrise. By the time the crows stirred, there were 6 men digging along the eastern trail, where the path from Harlow Ridge cut between 2 hills. Micah Langley worked beside them, sweat already pouring down his neck. Silas says it's not a trap, he told them. It's a message. The others didn't reply. They just dug. Deep, narrow trenches, camouflaged with broken sagebrush and netting soaked in dust. Every foot they unearthed wasn't just soil. It was fear. Fear of the mercenaries coming. Fear of the Murdocks. Fear of dying alone and unheard. These Harlow men, muttered Amos Weller, a rail-thin rancher with a scar across his jaw. They ain't the type you can scare with words. Micah nodded. Good thing we got more than words. Behind them, thunder rumbled, but there were no clouds. Just the echo of hooves far beyond the canyon line. They're comin', Amos said, spitting into the dirt. We better finish diggin' before we gotta dig for real. And still they dug. 6 men against a small army. But somewhere deep in their bones, they knew. You don't wait for monsters in your bed. You set the fire at the door. Back in town, Silas wasn't resting. He stood behind the saloon, breaking open an old chest buried under a stack of lumber. Inside lay pieces of a life he had once folded away. A black long coat lined with red silk, 2 modified revolvers with snake-tooth notches in the grip, and a photograph. A woman, hair pulled back, eyes full of fight. Silas stared at it for a moment, then slid it into his coat. This ain't for you, Emma, he whispered. This is for what they did to you. Behind him, Mariana Murdock watched silently from a shadowed alley. Her hair was grayer now, her wrists thinner, but her heart still thudded in a rhythm she hadn't known in years. You haven't changed, she said. Silas didn't turn. You have, he answered. You married the man who murdered your sister. Mariana flinched. I didn't know. You knew, he cut in. But you ran out of choices. I ain't here to punish you, Mariana. I'm here to end him. She stepped forward. There's something you don't know. Elias. He keeps men beneath the estate. Locked away. Broken. One of them saw everything. Silas looked at her now. Then I'll break the locks too. Jed Murdock arrived by sundown with 12 riders behind him. Harlow Ridge men. Faces like rusted steel, eyes empty of conscience. One was missing half his nose. Another carried a saber carved from bone. They rode slow through the eastern pass, unaware of what lay beneath the dirt and netting. Jed raised a hand, halting them. Camp by the ridge, he ordered. We ride in full tomorrow. Burn it all if we have to. The leader of the Mercs, a man called Dunn, spat a brown stream of tobacco onto the trail. What exactly we walkin' into, boy? Jed narrowed his eyes. A ghost. Old, mean, and somehow still faster than hell. Dunn chuckled. Ain't met a man yet who can outrun lead. Jed said nothing, just stared into the rising moon. He hadn't told them everything. Not about the pendant. Not about what he saw in Silas's eyes. Because some things you don't explain. You just hope you survive long enough to forget. That night, Dunn's men drank, laughed, and sharpened blades. None of them saw the silent riders moving through the trees above. None of them smelled the oil soaking the bushes beside their bedrolls. Inside the Murdock mansion, Mariana crept toward the cellar. She'd stolen a key from Elias's coat while he slept. For years she hadn't dared. But now, the weight of what she once loved in Silas and what she'd allowed Elias to become pulled her forward like chains. The door creaked open and the smell hit her first. Damp blood rot. Hello, she whispered. No reply. Just a rustle in the dark. Then a voice. Heard you comin'. You're not him. She stepped inside. A lantern burned low in the corner. Beneath it, a man sat chained to the wall. Barely more than skin and bone, eyes yellowed, face familiar. "Jameson," she gasped. "We thought you were dead." He chuckled bitterly. "Almost. Been counting dust since '73. "Why?" she asked, voice cracking. "Because I saw Elias shoot a girl in that church," he said. "And because I saw the boy that lived." Mariana's knees gave out. "You saw Silas?" "I saw him die and come back all in one breath," Jameson said. "You want truth, ma'am? He ain't here to kill your husband. He's here to make him beg first." She rose slowly. "Then I'll let him." At dawn, Silas stood at the bell tower, coat whipping in the wind. The town was quiet, but not asleep. Men with rifles stood on rooftops. Women had sent their children into the old mine shafts with food and blankets. Micah rode up fast. "They've made camp 2 miles out. At least a dozen. One's got a cannon." Silas nodded. "Good. Let 'em get comfortable." Micah frowned. "You sure about this? There's no backup. No cavalry. Just us." Silas squinted into the rising sun. "Then we make every bullet count like it's a sermon." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the bull skull pendant. "When this falls," he said, tying it to the bell rope, "you shoot." "Not before." Micah looked up. "And if it doesn't fall?" Silas smiled, tight and cold. "Then I'm already dead." As the first rider crested the hill, Silas walked into the middle of the street. No cover, no backup, just dust and boots and fire in his bones. Behind him, the town held its breath. In front of him, hell approached with saddlebags full of death. And Silas Crane, the man they'd once buried in stories, stood alone, ready to rewrite the ending. The riders from Harlow Ridge came slow and confident, their laughter echoing down the gulch like the hiss of a fuse before detonation. Silas watched them from the middle of the street, his silhouette framed by the rising sun and the old church behind him. No one else was visible, just the wind and the silence. Dunn, the lead mercenary, pulled up his horse and spat. "Well, I'll be damned. Look at this dusty scarecrow trying to be Moses." He raised his pistol. "Step aside, Grandpa." Silas didn't blink. "You're standing in a grave, Dunn. Just don't know it yet." Behind them, Jed Murdock shifted uneasily. "Let's not." Dunn waved him off. "We're done playing ghost stories." He aimed for Silas's chest, but before he could fire, the pendant dropped from the bell rope like a spark falling into dry kindling. It hit the dirt, and then hell broke open. A thunderous crack split the ground as the buried oil traps ignited in one roaring wave. Flames tore through the trail, engulfing horses, men, and brush in one blazing chain. Screams followed, horses reared, and chaos swallowed formation. From the hills above, rifles fired with deadly precision. Micah's men had waited until the fire reached its peak, and now they carved through the stunned invaders with vengeance. Dunn's left arm vanished in a mist of blood. Jed screamed as a burning branch struck his face, toppling from his saddle. The mercenaries tried to regroup, but the trenches gave out beneath them, dropping bodies into spiked pits. "What the?" one shouted before disappearing into a hole. Silas moved through the blaze like it was wind, both guns drawn, firing in perfect rhythm. 2, 3. Each shot a prophecy fulfilled. Dunn tried to flee, dragging Jed with him, but Silas's bullet clipped his leg. "Told you not to come," he muttered. Blood splattered his boots. The town bell rang again, not by rope, but by recoil. Down below, the townspeople emerged like spirits from ash. Amos and 2 others pushed wagons across the western pass, cutting off retreat. A seamstress with a borrowed shotgun stood over a wounded rider and didn't flinch. "No more fear," she said before pulling the trigger. Micah ran from post to post, shouting orders. Keep 'em in the kill zone. Don't let 'em scatter. But it wasn't just a firefight. It was a resurrection. Dagger Gulch had been asleep for years. Now it screamed. Mariana stood in the church doorway, watching it all unfold, tears streaming down her face. "This was always the price," she whispered. Behind her, Jameson limped out, dragging a rusted shotgun. "I'll settle for interest," he muttered, and joined the fight. Jed crawled toward the saloon, face burned, sobbing. "Please, no more." Silas walked up to him slow. "You called for a ghost," he said. "Now you meet him." He raised his gun. Jed whimpered. "He made me." Silas paused. "You mean your father?" Jed nodded. "Then you'll ride ahead and tell him I'm coming." By sundown, the smoke had cleared. 12 Harlow Ridge riders entered Dagger Gulch. 2 left breathing. One of them was Jed. The other was done, missing an arm and half a soul, left tied to his saddle like a warning nailed to a moving wall. Silas stood in the church again, washing blood from his hands. Micah approached, eyes wide. "We did it," he said. "They're gone." Silas shook his head. "No, they were just teeth." The snake still coiled. Mariana entered. "You'll go to him?" Silas nodded. At first light. She placed something in his hand. A small Bible, burned at the edges. He kept this. In a drawer he never opened. "Thought you should see it." Inside was a name, Emma Crane. Silas's breath caught. He remembered? Mariana nodded. You weren't the only ghost in his life. Silas clenched the Bible shut. He don't get redemption. He gets reckoning. Micah stood straighter. "We'll ride with you." Silas looked at him. "No, this one's mine." That night, no one slept. The town just listened to the wind, waiting to see if it would howl or whisper. And the wind whispered only one name, Red Wind. The sun had barely touched the ridge when Silas Crane mounted his horse and rode toward the Murdock estate. He wore his long coat now, black with red lining that flicked behind him like the last ember of a dying fire. On either hip sat the guns that made his name feared across 4 territories. The road to the estate was quiet, too quiet. Burned sagebrush lined the trail. Birds didn't sing. Even the wind crawled instead of ran. It wasn't just silence. It was dread carved into the dirt. He passed a broken wagon near the creek, bones of old victims still tangled in its wheels. This land was cursed by the man who ruled it, and Silas had walked through enough graves to know what that meant. Behind him, no posse followed. He told them not to. "This part ain't about justice," he'd said. "It's about remembering what must never be forgotten." As he approached the final hill, the manor stood high above, its silhouette jagged against the pale sky. A fortress, a cage, a throne, and the devil who sat in it was waiting. Inside the mansion, Elias Murdock knelt in prayer, not to God, but to the old rage that had kept him alive this long. His Bible sat open on a velvet chair, untouched. He wasn't reading. He was sharpening a knife, one he hadn't used since 1872. Mariana was gone, vanished into the night with only a note left behind. Elias didn't need to read it. He knew what it said. She was always the weakest part of him, and Silas had come to break that final tether. Jed was upstairs, wrapped in gauze, trembling in a bed he once thought invincible. "You'll have to kill him, Pa," he whispered. "He ain't like the others." Elias wiped the blade clean. "No, he's worse. He's what I used to be before the world gave me reason to burn it." Down in the cellar, Jameson's cell sat open. His chains were broken. The dogs in the barn were dead. Someone had poisoned them. Elias didn't care. Let the ghosts come. He wasn't planning to win this with bullets. He was planning to unmake Silas piece by piece. "Let him walk in," he muttered, "and I'll show him what hell remembers." Silas reached the gate and didn't bother knocking. He shot the lock clean off and stepped into the courtyard. Every step echoed like thunder through the stones. Servants had vanished. No gunmen lined the windows. Too easy. He paused. "Elias," he shouted, "you sent boys to kill me. You burned churches. You buried my name. But I'm still here." His voice echoed back empty. Then, from the top window, Elias's voice slithered out like a sermon. "Welcome home, Silas." The doors creaked open on their own. Silas stepped inside. The air smelled of oil, dust, and blood. He passed the grand hallway where paintings of Murdock ancestors stared down like judges in a rigged trial. One by one, he shot them. "Not your house anymore," he growled. The piano in the parlor began playing, a broken, dissonant melody. Elias was trying to unnerve him, but Silas wasn't here to play games. "Come down and bleed like a man," he barked. No answer. Only the flicker of candlelight down the hall. Silas followed it, slow and ready, like a wolf scenting another. In the center of the library, Elias waited, a blade in one hand, revolver on the desk. "You took my wife," he said. "You took my son's pride." Silas stared. "You took everything first." Elias stood. "I gave you purpose. You were nothing until I made you my enemy." "You murdered a woman in a church," Silas growled. "You made a boy hold her body. That boy died that day. What's left just came to close the coffin." Elias moved fast for a man his age. The blade swiped through the air. Metal met leather as Silas dodged, drawing both guns. 2 shots missed. One hit Elias in the shoulder. The old man laughed. "Still faster than death, are you?" Silas dove behind a desk as Elias fired back, bullets tearing books to dust. "This house ain't yours," Elias roared. "It never was." "You're right," Silas spat, rising. "It belongs to the dead." The final charge came fast. Silas caught Elias by the collar, slammed him into the mantel. The blade fell. A final shot rang out. Elias gasped, blood soaking through his ribs. Silas stood over him, eyes hard, gun still smoking. "You should have stayed buried," he said. Elias looked up, grinning through pain. "You think killing me changes anything?" "No," Silas whispered. "But it ends it." He pulled the pendant from his pocket and dropped it on Elias's chest. This was hers. "You don't get to carry it anymore." As Elias's eyes dimmed, the house seemed to exhale. Outside, the wind picked up, sweeping dust across the valley. Silas walked out, boots echoing over stone. The sun broke the clouds, and somewhere behind him, the last of the Murdock line drew its final breath. Dagger Gulch wouldn't hear the name again. Not in fear, not in legend. It would hear another name now. One whispered with reverence, not terror. Redwind, the outlaw who didn't come to kill. He came to end the silence. The wind over Dagger Gulch carried no thunder that morning, just silence deep and aching. The kind of silence left after something monstrous has been buried. Silas Crane stood at the edge of the ridge overlooking the town. Hat in hand, coat stained from Elias Murdock's blood. The sun rose behind him, gold and soft, but it couldn't warm the chill in his bones. For the first time in 20 years, the valley lay quiet. No gallows creaked. No church bell echoed in warning. He thought it would feel like peace. Instead, it felt like the pause before grief. Below him, the town stirred slowly. Women swept ash from porches. Men patched fences that had bullets in them just yesterday. Life was creeping back in, but it moved carefully, as if the ground might split again. Silas lit a cigar, then stopped. He let the match burn to his fingertips. "Don't need it anymore," he muttered, tossing it over the ridge. A sound behind him, a rider approaching. He didn't turn. He knew who it was. "You said you'd ride alone," Micah called softly. Silas finally looked back. "Didn't say I'd leave alone." Micah dismounted and walked beside him. "Town's talking," he said. "Some want you to stay. Be sheriff. Some say you should ride out before they start calling you Messiah." Silas gave a dry smile. "I ain't no lawman, and I damn sure ain't no savior." He looked down at his hands, still trembling. "All I know how to do is stop bad men before they do worse." Micah nodded. "Maybe that's all a sheriff is." Silence passed between them. Then Micah added, "Jed Murdock, he's alive. Barely. Says he don't want revenge. Says he wants to disappear." Silas didn't answer right away. "Let him," he said finally. "We kill every snake. The rats start getting bold. Best let one crawl away, so the others remember why they don't bite." Micah didn't argue. He'd seen what Silas did. He'd seen how fast a man could become something else when pushed. "Mariana's gone too," Micah added. "Left a note at the church. Headed south. No forwarding trail." Silas looked up at the sky. "Good. Some ghosts ain't meant to haunt the same place forever." In the center of town, the church bell was rung for the first time, not as a warning, but as a call. Children gathered with flowers. One of them placed a drawing at the steps, a stick figure with a long coat and 2 pistols, standing between the sun and a crowd of smiling faces. Below it in block letters, "Thank you, Redwind." Silas stared at it when he rode down. Didn't touch it, just nodded once. The little girl who drew it blinked at him, then ran up and hugged his leg. "You're not scary," she said. "You're what safe looks like." He couldn't speak. His hand hovered over her head, unsure, until he gently rested it there. "Stay that way," he whispered. Then he mounted his horse. The town gathered around him, not cheering, not shouting, just watching, respectful, quiet. A blacksmith raised a fist. A schoolteacher took off her hat. Silas didn't raise his hand, didn't speak. He just tipped his hat and rode through, the street parting like a sea. Redwind was leaving, not because he had to, but because his story here was done. At the edge of the gulch, Jameson waited. He was leaning against a tree, shotgun slung across his back. "Heard you made the house fall," he said. "Heard you made the snake bleed." Silas nodded. "You healed." Jameson laughed. "Never. But I'm breathing. That counts for something." He looked toward the hills. "What now?" Silas adjusted his saddle. "Don't know. Maybe I find a place with no ghosts. Maybe I stop running from the ones I've got." Jameson sighed. "Ain't no place like that." "Not really." Silas smiled. "Then I'll ride until I make one." He turned to go, but Jameson called out, "You think the name sticks?" Silas paused. "Redwind." Jameson nodded. "That name's bigger than you now." Silas looked toward the horizon. "Let it be. Maybe the next time someone hears it, they'll think twice before raising a hand to the weak." Then, without another word, he rode west. And the wind followed. The dust settled. Dagger Gulch healed slow but true. The church reopened. The saloon stopped serving bullets and started serving whiskey again. Micah was made sheriff. Fair, firm, with the same quiet steel in his spine Silas once carried. Children played in the streets without fear. And every so often, a traveler would come through, asking if the stories were real. About the ghost with a bull skull pendant. About the old man who never missed. About the outlaw who didn't kill for glory, but for silence. And always someone would answer the same way. "We don't tell it for the guns. We tell it for the bell. The church bell. The one that stopped ringing when evil ruled, and rang again when Redwind returned." Silas rode west for 3 days, avoiding the roads. He traveled like a shadow, never seen, never leaving tracks for long. The land here was open and wide, dotted with red hills and dying trees. The kind of land that remembered more than it forgave. On the fourth day, he reached it. A grove of twisted oaks stood like old sentries around a small house now falling apart, its roof sagging, porch half-rotted. The place hadn't changed. Not since 1869. Not since Emma died. Silas dismounted and approached slow, every step dragging a memory behind it. The swing still hung from the tree, though the rope was frayed, the seat broken in two. He could almost see her sitting there again, laughing with that sun-warm smile, barefoot in the dust, telling him to build her a house with a bell so she'd never miss supper. He'd promised her, but he never built it, because by the time he returned from hunting Elias the first time, Emma was already gone, shot by men who came looking for him. And that's when Red Wind was born. He stepped through the door like a thief breaking into his own past. The floor creaked, dust rising in little ghosts. On the mantel sat the only thing left untouched, a photo of Emma in a wooden frame. He picked it up gently, brushing the dust from the glass. "I should have stayed," he whispered. "You told me not to go. You said revenge don't bring back the ones you love." He sat in the chair where she used to knit, and for the first time in years, he let the tears come. No shame, no hiding, just grief, pure and wild. "They killed you to hurt me," he said, "and I let them turn me into something I never was. I let rage walk in my boots and silence ride my horse. I never came back till now." The wind blew through the cracks in the boards like a sigh. He looked up, but I ended it. "Elias is gone. The Murdocks are gone, and I made sure they'd never hurt another soul." He pulled the Bible Mariana gave him from his coat and set it beside the photo. "You can rest now. Maybe I can too." He stayed the night. Didn't light a fire. Just sat and listened to the land breathing. It didn't breathe easy, but it didn't choke on blood anymore either. In the morning, he packed his things, mounted his horse, and started to ride. But someone stood on the road ahead. A boy, no older than 16, with dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that looked too familiar. He didn't draw a gun, didn't speak right away, just stared. Silas pulled his horse to a halt. "You lost?" he asked. The boy stepped forward. "My name's Elijah. Elijah Crane." Silas froze. "My mother's name was Emma," the boy added. "She told me you'd come someday. Told me if a man with storm in his eyes ever asked for forgiveness, I should listen." Silas dismounted slowly. She was pregnant?" His voice cracked like dry timber. "She hid me," Elijah said. "Friends took me south. I didn't come back till I heard your name spoken in a town where devils used to run free." Silas fell to his knees. I didn't know you existed." The boy nodded. "She did. That was enough. Until now." They sat by the old swing for hours, talking like water finding its way through cracks. Elijah told him how he'd grown up in a dusty village with kind strangers and old letters. How he memorized every word his mother left him. "She loved you," he said, "even when you became Red Wind. She said that was just the storm that came to bury the ones who'd buried your soul." Silas stared at the ground. "I failed her." Elijah shook his head. "You lived. That was all she ever asked." Silence fell again. Then the boy pulled something from his coat. A small silver bell, rusted, but still whole. "She made me promise to give this to you if we ever met. Said it was for the house you never built." Silas took it, hands trembling. "I'll build it now," he said. "I'll build it with my own hands. For her. For you." Elijah smiled, tears brimming. "Then maybe this land can finally heal." And in that quiet place, father and son stood together for the first time. Not in bloodshed, not in rage, but in the shadow of what love refused to let die. That night, the swing moved in the wind again. Silas slept in the house. Elijah built a fire. And the land, for once, didn't whisper threats. It hummed like something remembering a song. And just before dawn, the bell rang, soft, silver, sweet. Like a promise finally kept. Weeks passed, then months, and the town of Dagger Gulch changed in quiet ways. No gallows stood anymore. Micah saw to that. The church bell was rung daily now, not to signal danger, but to call kids to lessons. The schoolhouse reopened. The saloons stopped posting bounties on the wall and started printing poetry. No one knew who kept slipping it under the door, but it smelled of tobacco and regret. New families arrived. Old ones returned. The graveyard was cleaned, flowers planted. And on a hill just beyond town, a small wooden house began to take shape, slowly, carefully, by two hands that once only knew how to draw blood. Silas Crane didn't leave. He didn't disappear into the wind like people expected. He stayed, and every morning, he hammered nails beside his son Elijah. The boy never once called him Pa, he didn't have to. The silence between them spoke clearer than any word. It was forgiveness nailed into every board. It was healing not shouted, but built. People came from other towns to see him, to ask questions, to shake his hand. "You really Red Wind?" they'd ask. He'd always answer the same way. "That name belongs to the man I was. I'm just Silas now." But when danger came close, when a rustler tried to rough up a farmer or a bounty hunter showed up looking for ghosts, the man who stood in front of the innocent still moved like a storm, still had the eyes of someone who'd outlived fire, still carried a pendant in his pocket with a bull skull no one dared touch. The children called him Mr. Crane. The elders just nodded when he passed. But at night, when the wind swept through the canyon, they swore it carried whispers. Red Wind watches. The legend didn't die. It simply rested, tamed by peace, honored, not feared. And on Sundays, when Elijah read scriptures at the Hill Church, Silas would stand outside, coat open, hands quiet. Not praying, just listening, as if he finally had someone worth listening to. One morning, a rider arrived with a letter. It was from Mariana. South of the border, she'd opened a small orphanage, using Elias's money. What was left after she burned most of it? "I'm giving life where he dealt death," the letter read. She asked nothing of Silas, just wanted him to know. Elijah read it aloud. Silas didn't speak for a while, then said, "Good. Let her do what she can." That night, he took out the Bible Mariana gave him and left it on the porch. "That chapter's closed," he said. "Let the wind write the next one." Jameson, who visited weekly now, brought whiskey and tales. "You know they're tellin' stories about you in Dustridge?" He chuckled. "Say you once shot a man so clean, the bullet wrote justice on his bones." Silas laughed, rare and rough. "Long as they forget the ones I didn't save," he said. Jameson tipped his hat. "They won't, but they'll remember the one you became after." And that's what mattered. The small house was finally finished in spring. 2 rooms, a working stove, a bell above the door. Elijah hung the silver bell himself. "She can hear it now," he told Silas. And for once, Silas let himself believe it. On the day of the opening, the whole town came. No speeches, just food, laughter, and music. Kids played under the oak swing, now rebuilt. The air smelled like wildflowers and would smoke. Micah brought a carved sign. Emma's Place. It wasn't a church. It wasn't a saloon. It wasn't a monument. It was something in between. A place for travelers to rest. For people to remember. For stories to be told without blood. As the sun dipped low, Elijah stood with his father on the porch, watching the shadows stretch. "You ever gonna leave again?" the boy asked. Silas shook his head. "No," he said. "The wind carried me far enough. Time I stood still." The boy nodded, and for the first time he whispered, "Pa?" Silas didn't move, just closed his eyes. "Yes, son?" She'd be proud. And the wind didn't howl. It just listened. That night, the wind curled around Dagger Gulch like a lullaby. The stars came out slow, no longer hiding behind smoke. In the distance, coyotes howled, but not with hunger, with memory. Silas stood outside the house long after everyone had gone to sleep. The silver bell glinted in the moonlight. He looked up at it, then at the night sky. "Thank you," he said, "to the woman who made him feel again, to the sun who gave him purpose, to the land that forgave him." He stepped inside, closed the door, and somewhere deep in the canyon, a final whisper was carried far and wide. Red Wind walks no more. But the legend never left.